When It Rains, It Pours really presents some interesting morality questions as far as what's considered cheating and not cheating. I find this BL very fascinating, and I have watched enough of it and I have been so immersed in the world of it. I really felt compelled to do a podcast about it. There's so many things going on with this show that I just want to tear into. Hi, I'm Monique. I am the host of Off by Purple Art podcast, where I talk to you about K-dramas and C-dramas and BTS and so much more. And so much more does include BLs, which I have included a lot more in my podcast. So as you know, I want to talk about the BL, the Japanese BL, When It Rains, It Pours. And I find the two main leads in this show just utterly fascinating case studies. We have Sei, or Nakarai Sei, who is living with his best friend slash roommate, and they are in a really peculiar arrangement where they're not physically together. We have the other main lead character, who's Hagawara, and he lives with his girlfriend, and they're not intimate at all, or at least they have not been intimate with one another for well over a year. The two of them happen to work at the same company, and they really don't have a lot of interactions with one another until one fated day, by accident, Hagawara sends accidentally an email to Sei, or Nakarai. And through that, they start kind of like a correspondence to one another, and their conversations gradually over time become much deeper and deeper because they're not aware at the time that they're actually speaking to one another, and they find that they have a lot of commonality and similarities amongst one another, particularly in their relationships and how unfulfilled and unsatisfied they feel, and they just continue to get drawn closer and closer together. I probably am going to be going into some spoilers for further discussion for this show, but you probably already know where things are headed. We have two main lead characters who are male, who are in unfulfilling, unsatisfying relationships, at least in intimacy department, and honestly, emotionally a lot as well, who are able to talk with one another through email, have this anonymity, and then they do find out that they know each other, and then they start meeting with one another, and they start bearing their souls a little bit more and a little bit more, and bearing everything until one fated night they cross that line. And man, does it get serious. Does everything not hit the fan quick? I really like how this show is filmed. I really like the very obvious metaphors that the show puts forth, even with the name When It Rains, It Pours. It kind of tells you everything you need to know. I like the lighting and cinematography of it. I like the mood of it. And it's a very somber show. Now, it does deal with cheating. There is some debate with that, with this show. I find it interesting though, because I would say, at least in the case of Hagawara and his girlfriend, that they're living together and they have been intimate in the past. They officially call themselves boyfriend and girlfriend. Their relationship was monogamous, but steadily over time, Hagawara's girlfriend has slowly pulled away, and to the point where they haven't had relations in well over a year. And he does keep trying, and he's gently prodding, but she just further draws within herself. Outside of that, she's still very civil with him. They have their conversations, they have meals together in their apartment, and she's very cutesy with him. But when it crosses that intimacy barrier, she has no interest in it. And it's been slowly eroding away at Hagawara's confidence and just how he feels as a man in general. And it's so interesting because the show in itself, at least in the very beginning, had like light tossles of misogyny, but I really like the character growth with Hagawara in particular. Nakarai Sai is very interesting in his arrangement. He is living with a roommate who is a best friend, and Sai in particular had a lot of grief. He lost his parents pretty late in life. I would say he was in his early 20s, but don't quote me on that. Or like late teens, early 20s, he had lost his parents in a really brutal way. And he was dealing with a lot of grief and basically shut out most of his friend group, with the exception of Fujisawa, who is his roommate. And they kind of came to an understanding, and his friend was really there for him and provided him a lot of comfort in his deepest, darkest grief. And then they have moved in together and they have been cohabitating, and steadily Nakarai's attraction for him has increased. And I think part of it's too because he trusts him. They've been together and he's seen him at his absolute darkest and his most vulnerable, so it makes sense. But his friend is either aromantic or is on the ace spectrum, or what I suspect, there is probably some weird form of abuse, at least emotional abuse, that has been on the undercurrent that Nakarai hasn't really clocked yet. I say probably because the latest episode that I got to see, we're basically dealing with all the consequences. The two of them kind of effed around, literally, and they're about to find out. Everything about the last episode that just aired was so spectacular. Like, they finally gave in to their emotions. They've had this correspondence through email. They find out who each other is. They start meeting up secretly. And their respective partners definitely know something's up. But it just all comes together, and they do finally come together one rainy night, and they really get down. And it is extremely provocative and emotional and sensual, and it's heartbreaking and it's bittersweet at the same time. And no, I'm not someone that is condoning cheating. A lot of the problems within this show could be solved with just frank conversations. In cases where there is actual abuse or there is actual, assault, I can't speak to that, but I would think in most modern day relationships, if you are having trouble connecting to your partner intimately, physically, and it's been going on for a year and plus, I would think it would be absolutely appropriate to have a frank conversation. Now, culturally, maybe things are different. This is a Japanese BL that I am watching, but I'm just saying in general, for most healthy, functioning relationships, communication is absolutely crucial. And this is not happening between either set of partners, not really. But conversations are now going to be forced to be had because their partners have found out. Literally the same night that they actually come together and they start smashing boots is quite literally like just the aftermath. Their partners find out, which I think is very, very funny. But what's interesting to me is that Hagawara in particular is cheating. It is. He's cheating 100%. But I understand what the show is trying to cultivate and make things a little bit more morally gray so that no one really comes out looking like the totally innocent party, even though the responsibility of the relationship is the person that's in the monogamous relationship, 100%. But it was also revealed that his girlfriend has been speaking with some of their friends in their friend group, and she has been kind of sprinkling in her feelings towards Hagawara, and she essentially is saying he is too masculine in certain situations, and I'm assuming when he's trying to broach the subject of being intimate, and she finds it immediate turn off. Like, it just completely kills the mood, kills the vibe, all that. But she isn't communicating this. She's just saying, no, I'm not interested. We can do it later, maybe another time. I'm tired, and just completely stopping the line of communication. And it's been steadily eating and eroding away at the relationship. But she continues to be ignorant in the face of it and just ignore it. And Hagiwara is being extremely passive in this as well, and just letting that anger and resentment towards her and the relationship and the self-loathing and pity continue to build up, which I find is very fascinating because he actually wants to marry this woman and have children with her, but he is incapable of even having a really frank conversation with her about something that is extremely important. And in Nakarai's position as well, he has tried to cross that intimacy barrier with Fujisawa many a times, and every single time Fujisawa, his best friend, is like, no. He won't even engage in hugging, holding hands, nothing. He wants nothing to do with it whatsoever, and is very sterile and cold towards him in that respect, and is kind of emotionally manipulative. Now, I said in particular for their dynamic, the previews for the next episode were really explosive, and with the aftermath of the two main characters cheating, their partners find out. Hagiwara's girlfriend finds out by going through his phone when he comes back after the illicit affair, which I'm not a fan of, taking people's private property and running off. And then he finds out, and then he tries to contact Nakarai, only for the friend roommate to pick up the phone and basically hear him confess, which is a really interesting plot point that is very cliche in a lot of shows. You must, whenever you're calling someone, especially to give them a heads up something that's very sensitive information, you have to introduce yourself and actually ask if the person that you want to speak with is who you're speaking with. Yes, it's their personal property and you assume that you're calling that person, but you have to give clarification. You need to hear the other person on the line first. You can't just go spilling out stuff that could potentially put your life in danger, my boy. You can't do that. But anyways, in the preview, you see Fujisawa literally throw Sei into the bed, and he starts screaming in his face, and he's like, how dare you? I don't even want you to bring up that man's name. And it looks like he's like about to throttle him or something even worse. And now I have to wait on tenterhooks for the next week. But I just find all the discussion points around this show fascinating. I like the moral questions that it presents. The characters, I at least believe in Hagiwara's case, he is cheating. He cheated. No matter how badly you might think the girlfriend is handling their relationship and their lack of intimacy and the lack of communication, despite the fact that they have made some plans on being long-term with one another, their relationship should have had several frank conversations a while back, but there would be no story to tell, right? And in the case of Sei and his roommate situation, there's just a whole lot of manipulation. And unfortunately, with his particular case, because he has this immense gratitude towards his friend, and there's that level of trust there, I can see why it was so hard to walk away from it. But I do believe that there is some abuse at play, and I do think we're really going to get a real deep dive into it going into the next episode, which will be really fascinating to me. But as far as the two main leads and their chemistry is fantastic. I particularly like the actor who plays Hagiwara. I think he's really good in the bigger emotions and the vulnerabilities, especially when they were being intimate and he was just kind of stroking and admiring him and saying, you know, I can't believe your partner would take this body for granted. And you could just see him slowly just shatter, like all of his defenses completely gone. I think of especially in the moment in the latest episode when they were separated by glass. So there's like a literal physical barrier, but there's also that emotional wall that Sei has put up as well, and how poignant that scene was, and how he was just very plain and blunt and saying, I don't want to have coffee, I want you, you know? And I've heard some conflicting feelings towards the actor that's playing Nakarai or Sei, but I think he's doing a phenomenal job as well. I think he's just as engaging as a scene partner, and I think he has to play a lot more of the subtleties with this character in particular. I thought he was really good in The Morning After, And you can see him physically closing himself off, treating this as like a clinical thing that, you know what, we both need this scratch to be itched. We both have been craving intimacy from our partners. We're not getting it. We've been talking. We've been vulnerable enough with each other. Let's just do this, get this off of our chest. Let's get it out of our systems, and we'll go our merry way, and we'll never do this again. And our partners won't know any better. And he's trying to keep up this facade and keep up this face. And just through Hagawara's just plain yearning, he couldn't keep it up. And you can see him almost start to tear up once Hagawara closes in for the hug. And I thought that was really well done. I just think the show presents itself a lot of amazing questions. I like it's not straightforward. No, I'm not condoning cheating. I have to stress that because there might be some pushback to that. But I also know that I am consuming fiction. And in fiction, there are stories to be told, and there's clearly something that the writers or writer would like to convey. And I like to explore different dynamics. I also like BLs that tend to challenge. I may not like the overall product in some cases, but I like BLs that step outside the norm and, essentially try to push the envelope a little bit and be intriguing and have morally gray characters and have human characters that can make mistakes. And even if the mistakes, you can see them from a mile away, you still can empathize and understand where they're coming from and see all sides of it and show that there really isn't like the perfect victim and that there can be a lot of messiness from all sides. Even though I do think the onus is on those that are in the monogamous relationship. But the complexities are really fascinating with this show, and I really can't wait to delve into next week's ep. I believe the show is airing on Gagulala. There is other sites as well, but Gagulala is the official, I believe. Let me know your thoughts. If you're watching the YouTube format of this podcast, what do you think of this show? Do you like the moral questions that it presents? Do you believe what these two main lead characters are doing is cheating? I do believe, at least in one scenario at the very least. I would argue both, but more so in one scenario, whereas the other, it's like a little more complicated. Let me know your thoughts. If you're listening via Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please interact with those platforms as well. I'm always interested in differing opinions. I just like delving into shows. I like to talk. This is a podcast for those that are confused, because I've gotten some interesting comments as of late. I think people believe that this is like a clip show type of scenario thing and that I'm just talking over like a reaction. Like, no, I am doing commentary on shows that I watch. This is the bread and butter. This is what I do. I talk, and I enjoy getting back and forth with people. And I see a lot of the comments, and people are so analytical, and they'll pick up on things that I wouldn't even have dreamed of thinking of, and I just find it all fascinating. And that's where I truly get my joy in doing this. So I really do appreciate those that truly understand what I'm trying to do here and interact in a genuine way. I really do appreciate the time that you take to do so. So I highly encourage you to do so. Thank you for watching me ramble. Till the next video or podcast. Bye.